They said humanity was too young, too reckless, too primitive to join the Galactic Council. The elder races have been traveling between stars for millennia, while humans still fought with gunpowder and steel. When Earth finally achieved faster-than-light travel, the galaxy's response was polite dismissal, a pat on the head for the newcomers who didn't understand how things really worked. The Altari Empire had ruled for 10,000 years. The Xinthac Collective had never lost a war. The crystal beings of Vaelthera could reshape matter with thought alone. What could a species that had barely left its cradle possibly offer? Then came the day when the greatest civilizations in the galaxy sent out a distress call that would echo through the void, a desperate plea from those who had never known defeat, begging for salvation from an enemy they couldn't comprehend. Earth heard that call, and the galaxy would learn what it truly meant when humanity said, "We're on our way." Commander Sarah Chun stood in the communications bay of the ESS Defiance, watching the massive holographic display flicker with incoming transmissions from across the galaxy. As head of Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Division, she had seen her share of routine traffic between the established galactic powers, but nothing like this. The first signal had arrived 3 hours ago, crackling through space with the unmistakable encryption signatures of the Altari Empire. Sarah's translation computers had struggled with the archaic formal language the Altari typically used for official communications, but the message that emerged made her blood run cold. Mayday! Mayday! This is Imperial Admiral Thaxon of the 7th Fleet. Unknown entities have breached our outer territories. Conventional weapons ineffective. Requesting immediate assistance from all capable civilizations. Emperor, preserve us. They're not just destroying our ships, they're taking them. The second transmission came from the Xinthac Collective, their normally emotionless synthetic voices carrying what Sarah could only describe as panic. Emergency broadcast to all sentient species. Xinthac defense grid compromised. Enemy forces demonstrate impossible technology. Our computational matrices cannot predict their movements. Collective unity failing. Request all available military support. By the time the third message arrived from the crystal beings of Vaelthera, Sarah was already reaching for her emergency communication device. The Vaelthera rarely spoke to other species at all, considering themselves far above such mundane interactions. Their message was brief and devastating. Ancient enemy returned. Cannot stand alone. Galaxy will fall if unity not achieved. All must come. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from his console, his face pale. Commander, we're receiving similar distress calls from the Karathi Federation, the Miran Republic, and at least 12 other major civilizations. Whatever's happening out there, it's happening fast. Sarah's mind raced. The powers sending these messages represented the most advanced civilizations known to exist. The Altari had conquered half the galaxy before settling into their current empire. The Xinthac Collective possessed technology that could restructure entire solar systems. The Vaelthera were rumored to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. If all of them were calling for help, humanity was looking at something beyond catastrophic. "Give me a direct line to Admiral Harrison immediately," Sarah ordered, "and patch me through to the Global Defense Council." This is now a code black emergency. As her staff scrambled to establish the connections, Sarah continued monitoring the incoming transmissions. The pattern was becoming clearer and more terrifying by the minute. Each distress call described the same phenomenon. An unknown enemy that appeared without warning, demonstrated impossible technology, and seemed to grow stronger with each victory. The Altari had lost 17 fleets in 2 days. The Xinthac Collective, whose networked intelligence had never been defeated in strategic combat, reported that their enemies seemed to anticipate every move before it was made. Most disturbing of all, the Vaelthera claimed that these entities violated the basic laws of physics. Admiral Harrison's gruff voice crackled through the speakers. "Chin, please tell me you're calling about routine traffic delays." "Sir, we have a galaxy-wide emergency situation. I'm transmitting all intercepts to your personal console now." Every major civilization is under attack by unknown entities, and they're all requesting immediate assistance. There was a long pause on the other end. Sarah could hear the Admiral's breathing, the sound of data being processed. Finally, he spoke again, his voice carrying a weight she had never heard before. "Sarah, are you telling me that the same civilizations that won't even acknowledge our existence in normal diplomatic channels are asking us for help?" "Yes, sir. And from what I can determine, we might be their last hope." The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel only 23 years ago. Their first contact with galactic civilization had been met with polite condescension at best, outright dismissal at worst. Earth maintained small diplomatic stations in neutral territories, but the major powers treated humanity like children playing with toys they didn't understand. Now those same powers were begging for salvation. "I'm calling an emergency session of the Defense Council," Admiral Harrison said. "Keep monitoring all channels and start compiling everything we know about these unknown entities. If we're going to respond to this, I need to know exactly what we're up against." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Sir, are you saying we're actually considering getting involved in this?" "Commander, 30 years ago, my grandfather fought in the last major war on Earth. He used to tell me that the measure of a civilization wasn't how advanced their technology was or how many worlds they controlled. He said it was about what they did when someone called for help." The Admiral paused, and Sarah could hear him taking a deep breath. "Besides, if these entities can take down the Altari and the Zinthak, what do you think happens when they turn their attention to Earth? This isn't about helping our neighbors anymore. This is about survival." As the call ended, Sarah turned back to the holographic display. More distress calls were arriving every few minutes now, each one painting a picture of systematic destruction across the galaxy. Whatever these unknown entities were, they weren't just conquering, they were consuming entire civilizations. Lieutenant Rodriguez approached her station with a data pad in his hands. "Commander, I've been analyzing the transmission patterns. The attacks aren't random. There's a clear progression, moving from the outer rim territories toward the galactic core. Based on the current rate of advancement, how long until they reach Earth?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. 6 months, maybe 8 if they encounter significant resistance. But given what we're seeing, Rodriguez shook his head. "Commander, I don't think any individual civilization can stop them." Sarah stared at the display, watching the red markers indicating lost systems spreading across the galactic map like a plague. The greatest military powers in known space were falling one by one, and soon Earth would stand alone against something that defied comprehension. But as she watched, something else caught her attention. Among all the desperate pleas for help, she noticed something interesting. None of the major powers were coordinating their responses. The Altari were fighting alone. The Zinthak Collective was retreating into defensive positions. The Vaelthra had withdrawn to their crystal worlds. These ancient civilizations, for all their power and technology, were making the same mistake that had plagued countless species throughout history. They were facing extinction because they couldn't work together. Sarah smiled grimly as she reached for her communication device again. If humanity was going to answer this distress call, they weren't going to make the same mistake. Earth's greatest strength had never been their technology or their individual power. It had always been their ability to unite against impossible odds. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, I want you to begin compiling a complete tactical analysis of every distress call we've received. I need to know the capabilities, weaknesses, and current positions of every civilization asking for help." "Commander, surely you're not thinking..." "I'm thinking that if we're going to save the galaxy, we're going to need everyone working together. And if the past 23 years have taught us anything, it's that sometimes it takes the newcomers to show the old powers how things should really be done." As Sarah Chun stood in the communications bay of the ESS Defiance, surrounded by the desperate cries of a galaxy in chaos, she made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Earth wasn't just going to answer the distress call. They were going to show the universe what humanity was really capable of when everything was on the line. The largest mobilization in human history was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. 2 hours later, the Global Defense Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from every Earth nation gathered in the massive chamber beneath Geneva, their faces grim as Admiral Harrison presented the situation. The holographic display in the center of the room showed the current state of the galaxy, with red zones indicating areas under attack and yellow zones representing civilizations that had gone silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Harrison began, his voice carrying across the chamber, "we are facing a decision that will define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. We can retreat to Earth, fortify our defenses, and hope that whatever is destroying our neighbors will somehow pass us by. Or we can do what we've always done when faced with impossible odds." Secretary General Maria Santos stood up from her position at the head of the council. "Admiral, with all due respect, we're talking about committing Earth's entire military capacity to defend civilizations that have treated us like second-class citizens since first contact. Our obligation is to our own people first." "Madam Secretary," Admiral Harrison replied, "with all due respect, our people won't survive if the rest of the galaxy falls. These entities aren't conquering territory. They're consuming entire civilizations. When they're finished with the Altari and the Zenthak will be the only thing standing between them and empty space." Defense Minister Chan Wei leaned forward in his chair. "What exactly are we looking at in terms of military commitment? How many ships would we need to send?" "Everything," Admiral Harrison said without hesitation. "Every functional starship, every trained crew, every weapon we can manufacture. This isn't about sending a token force to help with cleanup operations. This is about the survival of galactic civilization." The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Representatives argued about the risks of leaving Earth defenseless, the impossibility of fighting an enemy that had defeated far more advanced civilizations, and the wisdom of intervening in conflicts that weren't directly threatening human territory. Through it all, Admiral Harrison stood quietly at the center of the room, waiting for the debate to run its course. Finally, he raised his hand for silence. "I understand everyone's concerns," he said, "but let me share something with you that Commander Chen discovered in her analysis of the distress calls. These ancient civilizations, with all their power and technology, are losing because they're fighting alone. The Altari won't coordinate with the Zenthak. The Veilthra refuse to share their technology. Each civilization is convinced that their way is the only way." He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed the scattered defensive positions of the various galactic powers. "Look at this. They're not fighting a war. They're conducting separate battles against the same enemy. And they're losing every single one." Admiral Harrison turned to face the assembled representatives. "Humanity's greatest strength has never been our individual power. It's been our ability to unite when everything is at stake. We've seen it throughout our history. When faced with extinction, we don't retreat into isolation. We come together." Secretary General Santos stood up again. "Admiral, you're asking us to risk the entire human race on the possibility that we can succeed where more advanced civilizations have failed." "No, Madam Secretary," Admiral Harrison replied. "I'm asking us to risk the entire human race on the certainty that if we don't try, everyone fails, including us." The vote, when it finally came, was closer than Admiral Harrison had hoped, but decisive enough to proceed. By a margin of 67 to 33, the Global Defense Council authorized the largest military mobilization in human history. Every shipyard on Earth and in the solar system began working around the clock. Every military academy accelerated its graduation schedules. Every research facility focused on developing new technologies for the coming conflict. But, most importantly, Admiral Harrison authorized something that no galactic civilization had ever attempted, a direct diplomatic mission to coordinate the defense of the entire galaxy. As the ESS Defiance prepared to depart on its historic mission, Commander Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck, looking out at the fleet assembling around Earth. Hundreds of ships, representing every advancement humanity had made since achieving faster-than-light travel, were preparing for a journey that would either establish Earth as a true galactic power or see the extinction of human civilization. Nervous? Lieutenant Rodriguez asked as he joined her at the viewport. Sarah smiled, watching as the massive dreadnought ESS Unity took position at the center of the formation. Terrified, she admitted, but also excited. For the first time since we reached the stars, humanity gets to show the galaxy who we really are. As the fleet began its journey toward the galactic core, Sarah Chun couldn't have imagined that within weeks, the name of Earth would be spoken with reverence in languages across 100 worlds, and humanity would prove that sometimes the newest voice in the room has the most important things to say. Admiral Marcus Harrison stood in the command center of the ESS Unity, surrounded by the largest collection of alien dignitaries ever assembled in one place. The massive dreadnought served as humanity's mobile diplomatic headquarters, and its main conference chamber had been hastily converted to accommodate the wildly different physiological needs of 17 different species. The atmosphere was thick with tension and barely contained desperation. To his left, Imperial Admiral Thaxon of the Altari Empire sat rigid in his ceremonial armor, his forearms crossed in what Harrison had learned was a sign of deep skepticism. The Altari had been rulers of their sector for 10 millennia, and the idea of taking strategic advice from humans was clearly painful. Across the table, the Zenthak representative designated as Prime Node 7742 flickered between different holographic configurations, its artificial consciousness struggling to process the unprecedented situation. The Zenthak Collective had never retreated from a conflict in their 3,000-year history, and the concept of coordinated defense seemed to conflict with their fundamental programming. Most imposing of all was the Veilthra delegate, a being of living crystal that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions human science couldn't measure. It communicated through harmonic frequencies that required special translation equipment, and its very presence made the air shimmer with energy. "This is unacceptable," Admiral Thaxon declared, his translator rendering his deep voice in clipped English. "The Altari Empire does not take orders from species that have barely learned to leave their birth world. We have fought the unknown entities to a standstill in the Kethra system. We require reinforcements, not lectures on strategy." Prime Node 7742's hologram shifted to display tactical data. Collective analysis indicates Altari claims of standstill are 93% inaccurate. Enemy forces have adapted to all Altari tactics within 47 hours of initial engagement. Projection of continued individual resistance. Extinction within 6 standard cycles. The Veilthra delegate's harmonic voice filled the chamber with crystalline tones. Ancient enemy demonstrates capability beyond standard physical laws. Previous encounters in deep history suggest evolutionary adaptation to combat methodologies. Isolation tactics guarantee failure. Admiral Harrison listened to the exchange with growing frustration. For 2 days, the greatest military minds in the galaxy had been arguing about jurisdiction, honor, and tactical supremacy, while the unknown entities continued their systematic destruction of galactic civilization. Entire star systems had gone silent, while these beings debated who should command whom. "Enough," Harrison said quietly, but his voice carried across the chamber with unmistakable authority. "Every hour we spend arguing about command structure is another hour these entities have to adapt to our individual strategies. Commander Chun, please display the current tactical situation." Sarah Chun activated the massive holographic projector, filling the center of the chamber with a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red zones indicated systems under attack, while yellow zones marked areas that had gone completely silent. The pattern was clear and terrifying, a spiral of destruction moving steadily toward the galactic core. "In the past 72 hours, Harrison began, We've lost contact with 47 star systems. The entities aren't just conquering territory. They're studying each civilization they encounter. Every fleet they face teaches them new tactics, new technologies, new ways to counter our defenses. He gestured to the red zones spreading across the map. The Altari lost 17 fleets because they used the same formation tactics they've employed for centuries. The Xinthac Collective's computational advantage became meaningless because these entities don't follow predictable behavioral patterns. The Veilthra's reality manipulation technology works perfectly against conventional threats, but these beings seem to exist partially outside our dimensional framework. Admiral Thaxon's forearms uncrossed slowly. What are you suggesting, human? I'm suggesting that our greatest weakness is also our greatest potential strength, Harrison replied. Each of our civilizations has developed incredible capabilities, but we've all specialized in different areas. The Altari have the most powerful conventional military force. The Xinthac possess unmatched computational resources. The Veilthra can manipulate fundamental physical laws. The problem is that we're all trying to fight the same enemy using only our own strengths. Prime Node 7742's hologram flickered with new data patterns. Human proposal implies strategic integration of diverse technological platforms. Collective analysis indicates potential for exponential force multiplication. However, coordination protocols remain undefined. The Veilthra delegate's harmonic tones shifted to what the translator indicated was deep interest. Human perspective demonstrates understanding of multidimensional tactical requirements. Ancient enemies' adaptation mechanisms may be overwhelmed by simultaneous exposure to incompatible strategic methodologies. Harrison felt a spark of hope as he saw the alien representatives beginning to consider the possibilities. Exactly. These entities adapt quickly to individual threats, but what happens when they face a completely integrated defense? Altari military precision coordinated with Xinthac computational power and protected by Veilthra dimensional manipulation. The logistics alone would be impossible, Admiral Thaxon protested. Our technologies are incompatible. Our command structures follow completely different principles. The Altari military operates on honor-based hierarchies that your democratic systems cannot comprehend. And the collective's network decision-making processes cannot interface with organic command structures, Prime Node 7742 added. Integration attempts would result in systemic failures across all participating forces. Sarah Chun stepped forward, activating a new section of the holographic display. Actually, we've been working on that problem. Admiral, with your permission? Harrison nodded, and Sarah began displaying the results of 3 days of intensive work by Earth's best military analysts and xenocultural experts. We're not proposing to change your command structures, she explained. We're proposing to create an overarching coordination protocol that allows each civilization to maintain its own operational methods while sharing critical information and resources. The hologram showed a complex network diagram with different color nodes representing various civilizations. Lines of communication and resource flow connected the nodes without requiring direct integration. Think of it as a translation layer, Sarah continued. The Altari maintain their honor-based command structure, but their tactical intentions get transmitted to Xinthac computational matrices for predictive analysis. The Xinthac provide probability assessments that get converted into strategic recommendations the Altari can implement using their existing protocols. Meanwhile, the Veilthra use their dimensional capabilities to provide intelligence and protection for both forces. The Veilthra delegates' harmonic tones rose in what the translator indicated was excitement. Proposal demonstrates sophisticated understanding of multidimensional operational requirements. Ancient enemies' adaptation mechanisms designed to counter unified strategic approaches. Coordinated but independent methodologies may exceed adaptation capabilities. Prime Node 7742's hologram shifted rapidly between configurations. Collective analysis of proposed coordination protocol indicates 97% compatibility with existing Zinthak operational frameworks. Probability of successful integration, 74%. Probability of improved combat effectiveness, 89%. Admiral Harrison Votshid Admiral Taxan Keifuli. The authorized military pride was legendary, and the idea of coordinating with other civilizations would be difficult to accept. But the alternative was the extinction of everything they had built over 10 millennia. Admiral, Harrison said quietly, I know what I'm asking, but consider this. The entities have never faced anything like what we're proposing because no civilization has ever been willing to try it. They've adapted to every individual threat because every threat has been individual. We have the opportunity to show them something completely unprecedented. Admiral Thaxhan was silent for long minutes, his forearms moving in complex patterns that Sarah's cultural briefings had told her indicated deep contemplation. Finally, he spoke. The Altari Empire has never accepted external command authority. Our military traditions stretch back 6,000 years, and they have served us well in countless conflicts. However, he paused, looking directly at Admiral Harrison. These are not countless conflicts. This is the end of everything unless we succeed. The alien admiral stood, his ceremonial armor glinting in the chamber's lights. I am prepared to commit the remaining Altari fleets to this coordination protocol, with the understanding that our tactical autonomy will be preserved and our honor maintained. Prime Node 7742's response was immediate. Collective consensus achieved. Zinthak computational resources will be integrated into proposed coordination framework. Warning. Collective unity requires preservation of networked decision-making protocols. The Veilthra delegates' harmonic communication filled the chamber with complex crystalline tones. Ancient protocols permit coordination with worthy allies against existential threats. Veilthra dimensional capabilities will be shared within proposed framework. Harrison felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. Then, let's begin immediately. Commander Chun, please establish communication protocols with all participating fleets. We need to begin integration procedures before the entities advance any further. Over the following days, the ESS Unity became the nerve center for the most ambitious military coordination effort in galactic history. Human diplomatic teams worked around the clock to establish translation protocols that could convert tactical concepts between completely different military philosophies. Engineers from 17 different species collaborated to create compatible communication systems. Strategic planners struggled to find ways to combine tactics that had evolved on different worlds under different conditions. The breakthrough came when Lieutenant Rodriguez, working with a young Altari tactical officer named Kethare and a Zinthak analysis node, discovered that the entity's adaptation mechanisms followed predictable patterns. They learned quickly from direct confrontation, but they struggled when faced with sudden changes in tactical approach. It's like they have excellent short-term learning capabilities, but limited long-term strategic memory, Rodriguez explained to the assembled command staff. They adapt perfectly to what they're currently fighting, but they don't retain those adaptations when they encounter new situations. Kethare's translator rendered her excited chittering into precise English. This suggests vulnerability to rapid tactical transitions. If Allied forces could implement sequential strategy modifications during single engagements, entity adaptation mechanisms might be overwhelmed. Prime Node 7742 projected complex probability matrices. Collective analysis confirms hypothesis. Entity behavioral patterns demonstrate adaptation threshold limits. Coordinated force multiplication combined with tactical fluidity exceeds observed adaptation capabilities by factor of 12. Admiral Harrison studied the data with growing excitement. They weren't just proposing to fight the entities. They were proposing to fight them in a way that would exploit their fundamental limitations. How quickly can we implement this? He asked. Sarah Chun checked her datapad. The first coordinated engagement is scheduled for tomorrow. The entities are advancing on the Valerian system, which contains the last major Altari fleet concentration. If our coordination protocol works, and if it doesn't, Admiral Thaxon asked. Harrison met the alien admiral's gaze steadily. Then, we find out very quickly whether humanity's greatest gamble in galactic history was worth taking. As the combined fleets moved toward the Valerian system, Sarah Chun stood in the communications bay of the ESS Unity, coordinating information flows between dozens of different civilizations. The holographic displays around her showed tactical data from Altari dreadnoughts, computational projections from Zinthak analysis nodes, and dimensional reconnaissance from Veilthra crystal ships. For the first time since the crisis began, she felt something she hadn't dared to hope for: optimism. The entities had never faced anything like what they were about to encounter. For the first time in galactic history, the major civilizations were truly working together, sharing their greatest strengths and compensating for each other's weaknesses. Tomorrow, they would find out if humanity's gift for unity could save the galaxy. The Battle of Valerian was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same. The Battle of Valerian began at 0647 Galactic Standard Time, and within the first hour, every tactical manual in known space became obsolete. Admiral Harrison stood in the command center of the ESS Unity, watching as hundreds of ships from 17 different civilizations moved in perfect coordination through the Valerian system. The holographic tactical display showed what should have been impossible: Altari dreadnoughts advancing in precise formation, while Zinthak computational nodes provided real-time tactical analysis, all protected by Veilthra dimensional shields that bent space itself around the Allied fleet. Contact with unknown entities in 30 seconds, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, the human officer coordinating communications between the Allied fleets. All ships report ready status. On the main display, space itself seemed to ripple as the entities emerged from whatever dimension they used for travel. The alien ships were unlike anything in the galactic database, writhing masses of dark matter and energy that seemed to exist only partially in normal space. They moved with fluid grace, adapting their formations instantly as they detected the Allied fleet. Entity force composition analyzed. Prime node 7742 reported through the communication link. Previous engagement data indicates adaptation to Altari tactics occurs within 4 minutes of initial contact. Recommend tactical transition protocol implementation. Admiral Thaxon's voice crackled through the speakers from his flagship. Altari forces initiating formation crimson. All ships maintain honor of the Empire. Sarah Chun watched her instruments as the coordination protocol she had designed began its first real test. Tactical data flowed between the Allied fleets in real time, with translation algorithms converting Altari battle language into Zinthak computational parameters and Veilthra harmonic frequencies. The first phase of the battle unfolded exactly as the coordination protocol predicted. The Altari fleet engaged the entities using their traditional hammer and anvil tactics, their massive dreadnoughts hammering the enemy formation while smaller ships maneuvered for flanking attacks. The entities responded quickly, their formations shifting to counter the familiar tactical approach. But just as the entities completed their adaptation, something unprecedented happened. Phase 1 complete, Torres announced. Initiating tactical transition. All Zinthak units, you are now primary engagement force. The Altari fleet suddenly disengaged, their ships pulling back in perfect coordination as the Zinthak collective's forces moved forward. Where the Altari had used brute force and tactical precision, the Zinthak employed computational warfare, their ships moving in constantly shifting patterns calculated by their network intelligence, each maneuver designed to exploit probability cascades in enemy formation structures. For the first time since the crisis began, Harrison watched the entities struggle to adapt. Their formations began changing to counter the new tactical approach, but before they could complete the process, the coordination protocol initiated its third phase. Veilthra, dimensional manipulation commencing, announced the crystalline voice of the Veilthra commander. Reality parameters shifting in sectors 7 through 12. Space itself began to bend around the battle zone as the Veilthra brought their most powerful capabilities to bear. Gravity wells appeared and disappeared. Time flowed differently in various sectors of the battlefield, and some entity ships simply vanished into pocket dimensions before being expelled into the path of Allied weapons fire. The entity's adaptation mechanisms, so effective against individual threats, began to break down completely. Every time they adjusted to counter one type of attack, the Allied forces shifted to an entirely different tactical approach. The coordination protocol that Sarachan had designed wasn't just allowing different civilizations to work together. It was creating a form of warfare that transcended what any single species could accomplish alone. Entity formations destabilizing, reported Kethare from the Altari Tactical Analysis Station. Their adaptation mechanisms cannot process simultaneous exposure to incompatible strategic methodologies. Prime Node 7742's holographic presence flickered with excitement. Collective computational models indicate entity retreat probability increasing to 78%. Enemy force cohesion declining rapidly. But Admiral Harrison knew they were still far from victory. The entities might be struggling to adapt, but they were also learning from the encounter. If they escaped to regroup, they would eventually develop countermeasures for the coordination protocol. All forces, Harrison announced, we're going to implement the final phase of the operation. This is our chance to end the threat permanently, but it's going to require every ship and every crew member to perform beyond anything they've done before. The final phase was the most ambitious part of the coordination protocol, a simultaneous combined assault using every advantage each civilization possessed. Altari dreadnoughts would provide the raw firepower. Zenthak computational networks would coordinate targeting with microsecond precision, and the Veilthra would manipulate space-time itself to ensure every shot found its target. But the key to the entire operation was humanity's contribution. The tactical flexibility and adaptive thinking that had allowed them to coordinate all these incompatible forces in the first place. All ships, this is Admiral Harrison, he announced on the fleet-wide channel. Today, we're not just fighting for our individual civilizations. We're fighting for the idea that different species can work together to achieve something greater than any of us could accomplish alone. Let's show these entities what the galaxy looks like when it stands united. The final assault began with a coordinated barrage from every ship in the Allied fleet. Altari particle cannons, Zenthak phase disruptors, and Veilthra reality manipulators struck the entity formation simultaneously, guided by computational targeting that achieved impossible precision across three-dimensional battlespace. The entities tried desperately to adapt, their formations shifting rapidly between defensive configurations. But for every adaptation they made, the Allied forces had a counter-adaptation ready. When the entities strengthened their forward shields, the Veilthra opened dimensional passages to strike from behind. When they dispersed to avoid concentrated fire, the Zenthak computational networks predicted their movement patterns and coordinated intercept courses for Altari fighters. Most importantly, whenever the entities began to develop effective countermeasures, human tactical officers throughout the fleet implemented what they called adaptive disruption, sudden, apparently random changes in strategy that prevented the entities from completing their adaptation cycles. The turning point came when Lieutenant Rodriguez, coordinating with his Altari and Zenthak counterparts, recognized a pattern in the entities' retreat formations. Working together, they predicted that the enemy would attempt to escape using a specific dimensional fold technique that the Veilthra had observed in previous encounters. All Veilthra units, Rodriguez announced, his voice steady despite the chaos of battle around him. The entities are going to attempt dimensional escape in 30 seconds. Can you collapse the fold points? The harmonic response from the Veilthra commander filled the communication channels with crystalline certainty. Dimensional escape routes identified and sealed. Entity retreat no longer possible. What followed was the first decisive victory against the unknown entities in the entire crisis. Cut off from escape and unable to adapt to the constantly changing tactical environment, the entity ships began to disintegrate as their own technology turned against them. Within minutes, the threat that had terrorized the galaxy for weeks was reduced to scattered energy signatures dissolving into space. The silence that followed the battle was profound. For long moments, hundreds of ships from 17 different civilizations hung motionless in space, their crews trying to comprehend what they had just accomplished. Finally, Admiral Thaxon's voice broke the silence. "This is Imperial Admiral Thaxon to all Allied forces. The Altari Empire formally acknowledges the tactical superiority of coordinated galactic defense. The honor of victory belongs to all who participated." Prime Node 7742's communication followed immediately. Collective analysis confirms total elimination of entity threat in this sector. Integration protocols exceeded all projected efficiency parameters. Coordination framework demonstrates exponential improvement over individual operational methodologies. The Vaelthra commander's harmonic tones carried what the translators indicated was deep satisfaction. Ancient enemy defeated through unity of purpose and diversity of capability. Galactic civilization preserved through unprecedented cooperation. As the Allied fleets began their return journey to the galactic core, Sarah Chun found herself in the unusual position of coordinating victory reports instead of distress calls. The success at Valerian had done more than defeat the immediate threat. It had demonstrated that galactic civilization could accomplish anything when it worked together. The implications went far beyond military victory. For the first time in galactic history, the major civilizations had not only cooperated but had actively integrated their capabilities to create something greater than the sum of their parts. The coordination protocols developed for the crisis were already being adapted for peaceful purposes: joint scientific research projects, combined exploration missions, and integrated trade networks. But perhaps most importantly, humanity had found its place in the galactic community. No longer the young, upstart species tolerated by ancient civilizations, Earth was now recognized as the mediator and coordinator that had made galactic unity possible. 3 months after the Battle of Valerian, Admiral Harrison stood in the newly constructed Galactic Coordination Center on the space station New Geneva, positioned at the neutral zone between the major civilizations' territories. Representatives from over 50 species worked together in the massive facility, addressing challenges that range from asteroid mining disputes to the establishment of joint colonies. The Altari had established a permanent embassy on the station, with Admiral Thaxon serving as their first ambassador to the integrated galactic community. The Zenthak Collective had contributed computational resources that made real-time translation between dozens of languages possible. The Vaelthra had provided dimensional manipulation technology that allowed the station to exist partially outside normal space, making it accessible to species with incompatible environmental requirements. "Commander Chun," Admiral Harrison said as Sarah approached his office, "I have something I think you'll want to see." He handed her a datapad containing the latest reports from the Outer Rim territories. Where the entity attacks had begun, new civilizations were emerging, species that had been hiding in the galactic margins for millennia, waiting for proof that the major powers could work together peacefully. "It turns out," Harrison continued, "that there are dozens of civilizations out there that were afraid to make contact because they thought they'd be conquered or ignored by the established powers. News of our coordination during the crisis has convinced them that things might be different now." Sarah scrolled through the contact requests, each one representing a species with unique capabilities and perspectives that could contribute to the growing galactic community. "How many are we talking about?" "Current estimates suggest we could be looking at over 100 new member civilizations within the next year," Harrison replied. "The galaxy is much more diverse and populated than any of us realized." As Sarah looked out through the station's main viewport at the steady stream of ships arriving from across the galaxy, she reflected on how much had changed since that first distress call. The entities that had threatened to consume galactic civilization had inadvertently created something unprecedented, a true community of species working together for common goals. But the most remarkable change was in humanity's role. Earth's ships no longer traveled alone through the galaxy. Human diplomatic teams were stationed on dozens of worlds, helping to mediate disputes and establish new cooperation agreements. Human tactical officers served aboard alien ships, sharing the coordination techniques that had made victory possible. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned what humanity had always known, that diversity was a source of strength, not weakness, and that the greatest achievements came not from individual brilliance, but from the willingness to work together despite differences. The threat that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization had instead transformed it into something greater than anyone had imagined possible. And at the center of that transformation was Earth, the young, reckless, primitive species that had dared to answer a distress call and show the galaxy what unity really meant. As Admiral Harrison and Commander Chan watched ships from dozens of worlds docking at New Geneva Station, they knew they were witnessing the beginning of a new era. The galaxy would never forget the day Earth responded to a distress call. But, more importantly, the galaxy would never forget what became possible when everyone worked together. In the years that followed, historians would mark the Battle of Valerian as the turning point that transformed a collection of isolated civilizations into a true galactic community. They would study the coordination protocols that made victory possible and the diplomatic innovations that turned former rivals into allies. But those who lived through those crucial months knew the real story was simpler and more profound. When the galaxy called for help, humanity answered. And in doing so, they didn't just save civilizations. They created a future where such threats could never again threaten the peace and prosperity of the galactic community. The distress call had been answered, and the galaxy would indeed never be the same. It would be better.